Hi and welcome to this transit call. We just went into Jinky 64 and that's what we're going to explore today together. So I'll start as usual with a little bit of a introduction to it. So we are right now in the artist archetype. This transit is going to be from September 4th to September 7th. This is the gate of confusion. In the I Ching, we call this before completion. In the Gene Keys, the frequency band goes from the shadow of confusion to the city of illumination, and the human pathway is the pathway of imagination. Here we're looking at the I Ching. So in all these hexagrams that we see in this part of the wheel, which is the 8th of the wheel, there are 8 gates in each element. So here we have water on the bottom. So it's yin, yang, yin in all these gates that you see here, the alpha, the philosopher, the water goddess, the playmate, the father, the artist, the alchemist, and the peacemaker. And in this specific one, we're going to have fire on top. So you're going to see this perfect geometry, open, closed, open, closed, open, closed. The same actually as the 63 as we're going to see in the programming partner, but that's the opposite. That's the mirror opposite. So here we are looking at a braid where when we have water over water, that's same thing as 29. When we have fire over fire, that same thing as 30. So this is a combination of water and fire. And looking at it in this geometry, the shadow of confusion is desiring half-heartedness. The gift of imagination is lightness in commitment. And then the city of illumination is rapturous devotion. And here we're looking at it in the wheel of the 12 astrological signs where we are in Virgo. Virgo is the independent priestess or the green man. It's service to spirit through devotion to sacred work. It is mutable earth. The first time in the wheel that we meet earth is in fixed earth in Taurus. Then we're mutable earth in Virgo and cardinal earth in Capricorn. Virgo is the leaf, always reaching for the light of spirit and doing the inner work that feeds the tree. And the ruler of Virgo, according to this graphic, is Mercury. If you were with us for the setup series, you can still get it for $11. We were doing a masterclass on Chiron as the ruler. And there is an author, Barbara Hand-Claw, who wrote a book on it. And the book came out first in 1987, where she is playing with Chiron as the ruler of Virgo. It's a really good book. That is now over 30 years ago, or about 30 years ago. And there's so much more, I believe, that speaks to that. And yeah, I really recommend the book. I'll put it in the chat later. And it's really good to have Mercury as the ruler of Gemini. And then we could say that the feminine part of Mercury is connected to the sixth sign, Virgo, and the sixth house. I believe that it's way more powerful to look at it as Chiron, and especially when we speak about the priestess work. So that is part of what's connecting to what we're going to see as well in the next few slides, which is the codon ring of alchemy, where we're seeing how we're working in the body, in the mutable earth, for the transmutation of those karmic imprints, which we see a lot in the 6 and the 47 and even the 40. That is definitely part of the exploration. So here we see that we have this archetype in the quarter of duality, where the purpose is fulfilled through relationships. And we could even speak about that relationship as a relationship to our own body, our own mutable earth, right? So that's what we see in here in those keys that are in the code ring of alchemy, the inner alchemy, but also the outer alchemy, where we are in relationship with the other. But that relationship doesn't have to be a relationship over a lifetime. It can be a mutable relationship. And that's really what we're seeing with Virgo. It's the priest or the priestess that can do the sacred work, and then they go out in the world and they are not tainted. And then there is an equilibrium that is completed in Libra, and then in Scorpio we have that true merging that is like until death somehow, like until whether death is happening over a short period of time or it's like the end of everything. But I really like to look at those two signs, as Virgo has the little tail coming inward, like looking inward to your own alchemy. And then with Scorpio, we have graduated through the inner union, the inner balance, the inner equilibrium of masculine and feminine. We have graduated so that we can go into that, also the outer penetration and reception with the tail going outward. So here we have the balancing and the true partnership, and the going in and the going out, balanced. Alchemy. And here we're looking at the body graph. So 64 is one of 3 gates in the head center. It's a pressure center. It has to do with inspiration. The not self theme here is it's thinking about things that don't matter. And I think we all know when that happens to ourselves, but more than anything, when that happened to other people, like, why are you even worrying about that? That is completely a waste of time. It's so easy to see when somebody else does it. It's way harder to see when we do it. So here with these gates, we have confusion, doubt, and psychosis. That's a lot what's out there. And we had Pluto in gate 61 during the whole entire COVID, speaking about mass psychosis and thinking about somehow also a fear that for many of us was even irrational, because many of us would have survived, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's about going in a loop or being stuck on things that don't matter. However, with those gates, the higher frequencies, the imagination, the inspiration, and the inquiry. And then we're looking here at the whole entire channel. So it's the channel of abstraction, a design of mental activity mixed with clarity. It's a projected channel. Your mind can be very inspiring for others or very confusing for you. Use your mind to solve problems that do not directly involve you. And for the artist, the keywords that we are using: imagination, creative expression, and quantum leaps. For the alchemist, repression, karma, and surrender. And then we're looking at the whole process of this whole channel. So this could be you having it, or you creating an electromagnetic with somebody, or especially like a longer transit. So not the moon that's going to be here today for a few hours, but a longer transit with the outer planets staying there, creating this with your own 64, for example, if you have that. Then there's a process that happens there. So the process has this frequency band, and this comes from integral human design. So when you have confusion and oppression, that is the shadow of bewilderment. When you have imagination and transmutation, that is the gift of realization. And where you have illumination and transfiguration, that's the city of myth. So these, like when I just say them like that, it's too fast to internalize. So if you have this channel by yourself, or if you're creating them with somebody that's close to you, take a little bit of time, take a screenshot, and feel into what this really means. And here we're looking at what I said before. So we have fire and water in the trigrams that are creating those 2 gates, but also we can just look at them as this perfect geometry of open and closed lines, mirror opposites. They are also opposites in the wheel on this axis of Virgo for the 64 and Pisces for the 63. And they're both living in the head center. And what they care about, that's often what I say. What do the archetypes care about? It depends about circuitry. And that's also why I say it's very good to learn about human design, because sometimes when we read the Gene Key book, we're like, there's so much to remember. How can I remember what each one of those 64 gene keys are about? Even if I learn about the frequency band, it really helps to understand circuitry, because then we know that all of the archetypes in the same circuitry are caring about the same thing, and that they are in 3 main groups, and then we can also look at smaller circuits. But the collective, they care about the collective, about humanity, about sharing, so that we can move on in a way that is more constructive than how we have lived before. We have the tribal, it cares about the tribe, about the family. It's a lot about support, about supporting the people that are creating the material plane with you, making sure that you can survive. And then we have the individual circuitry, which is all about the individual and the individual empowerment that can also inspire others to be empowered. And that's a kind of pulse that goes creativity or no creativity. So it mutates us through that inner kundalini, through that inner energy. So when you know that you have 64 gates and they all belong to one of those 3, then it's way easier to remember than if you have to remember everything that it says in the gene keys. So it's really helpful to have the matrix of the body graph to understand how to group the gates. So in this case, we're looking at collective circuitry, and we're looking at one of two circuits. And in this case, we have the sensing circuit, which is the abstract. It's not logical, it's abstract. And it's actually looking back at what has happened, and it's making sense of it. So the 64 and the 47, it doesn't necessarily make sense in the moment. It can be confusion, can feel like oppression, can feel like not that good. But when you look back at it, it's not necessarily even your experience, can be even in a wider sense. In the moment, it might not make sense, but when you look back, it does. And that's what you see everywhere where you have those gates that are black. And this is the human experimental way. You're going to be have to lean into the experience fully. We know that, especially if we read about the 46 and the 29, you lean into experience fully, and you just go. I always say that for the 31, the 30 and the 41, put on your seatbelt. If you have this channel with somebody, you're not sure where you're going to end up or where you're going to experience, but it will make sense when you look back, hopefully. And if it doesn't make sense for you, it makes sense for somebody who was observing you at that time. So that's what the whole sensing circuit is about. It's not logical. It's about going through an experience, living it fully, and then you can share about it. And it's not everybody has to make the same mistake in some cases or have the same experience. And here's the last thing that I'm going to show you today. And let's see if I even wrote the keywords in English somewhere. So here we have another way of looking at this. So again, we're looking at water and we're looking at fire. So water is what in this system, so this is Sergio Arboleda, it's a Colombian astrologer. We're looking at water as the purple color, which is connected to Scorpio. Water, Scorpio, the eighth signs, the eighth house of transformation, of going really deep. We know that water over water is the abyss. So it's like really going extremely deep. And then we have fire, which here we're looking at Gemini. Gemini is very fast. It connects to everything. So it's what in this system we're looking at fire. So we have a combination here of the third house or the third sign, Gemini, and the eighth house or the eighth sign, which is Scorpio, and they are connecting together to make up this archetype. We're saying that the bottom one is the actual kind of action of it, and the upper trigram is the environment that is happening in this system. And the verb, so we're using the frequency band in the gene keys, but in this system, we're using a verb. So the verb here is to discover. So if you're thinking about the 64, what it's doing in the world is to discover. And think about Richard Rudd having the 64 as his life's work, right? He discovered, he received the gene keys. He was playing with fire, he was playing with water, he was going really deep, he was studying with Ra, and then he got the transmission. And he brought it through in a very artistic way, the 64. Everybody who has the 64 in their lives, to me, they have something special, a very artistic way of bringing it out. That's the verb. And then we can go even deeper. And this is when we're looking, like in the I Ching, as the hidden trigrams within. And like I said before, we have this very perfect geometry in this case. So even if you look here, inside, not the top one, not the bottom one, you're going to have a water and a fire trigram on the inside as well. So it's like water and fire, Shakti all over the place. But when we're looking at this, we're also going to be able to create a braid. So we are still going to have the verb to discover, but we're going to be able to have a meaning and also a recommendation. So here it is to discover so that we can find out. So discover so that we can find out. And what is the recommendation in this hexagram? It is to observe the essential. So maybe this is exactly what Richard Rudd did. He was in human design. He learned about all the gates, about the circuitry, about the variables, about the magic square, about the bases and the tones and the colors. And what he did is, okay, but what's essential here? As a human being, what's essential? The frequency, the vibration. So he was not only observing, but actually bringing himself back to what was essential. And then as an artist, as a 64.4 in his life's work, he was able to take that essential. And this fourth line is all about externalization. He was able to externalize and share that essence, the essential, with the world. So that is example of how the 64 could work, especially in the fourth line. So this is just like we are doing in Unlock Your Design, is just to give you another example of how you could look at this. Because the saddest thing is when somebody takes the word of the gift, for example, and says, oh, but I don't have an imagination. This is my Jupiter. But I don't know, I don't have an imagination. And then you make everything about the 64 about to one word. And that is not actually to go to the essential. Like, it's way better to look at it in all different perspectives and see what stays with you.